I've experienced many of these demon things. Like, I wasn't demon possessed, duh, right? But, I've experienced and I've heard many people's firsthand testimonies. Even my cousin was like demon possessed by like 5 demons and such. And like, there's so many stories. I'm not sure if you guys have actually seen ghosts or not. But even for me, the very first time I experienced anything that was like of the demonic, right? The spiritual possessions, the demon possessions and such. I was like 11 years old, 12 years old maybe. And I was at a church camp or church retreat. And this is how crazy it was. I've never experienced anything. I've only heard about it. You only see it in the movies. So we're at this retreat. And, we had the campfire. It's really dark at night. And there's like a mess hall. It fits 300 people. And for some reason, the camp counselors were stopping everyone from going past a certain point. They said, everyone go to your cabins. I'm like, what is going on? And being the mischievous rebel pastor that I am, I was like, me and 2 of my friends goes like, all right, let's go sneak around and let's see if we can go figure out what's going on. And we went all the way around into the dark forest, right? So we can go all the way around, go past all the camp counselors and go into the mess hall, the place that they were trying to stop us from going into. And what happens is the mess hall has the opening door, like the entrance doors. And then you have a place where you put all your shoes, take off your shoes and stuff like that. And then you have another door that opens into the mess hall. Right when we opened the door, like the first entrance door, it was the smell of rotten eggs. Like, it was so strong. It wasn't, rotten eggs is also the same smell as sulfur. And we're like, what is that smell? And we're about to walk in, and a counselor, like a movie is like grabs, like, right? He was like, what are you doing? We're like, oh, we just wanted to see what's going on. They're like, hey, come over here. And we're like, what is going on? And what we found out was the pastor's daughter, younger than us. I think she was like 8 or 9 years old at that time. She was spiritually possessed. And there was the pastor doing an exorcism inside that hall. But there's only 2 of them in there in a hall that fits 300 people. But that smell of sulfur was coming all the way to the outside, doorway. And it was the first time we ever experienced anything like that. And we were like, you couldn't really freak out at that time. We're like, what? Like, what does that mean? We're not even sure because we've just never dealt with that type of thing. Only later, I was like, man, the pastor's daughter was spiritually possessed. I'm like, that's crazy. And that was my first experience, like 11, 12 years old, right? Like something like that happening. Now, 20, 30 years later, I've probably been through, like personally myself, I've dealt with, I think, 2 or 3 demon possessions. One of them was successful. One was not successful. What was the third one? Let me tell you another one. Another interesting story that, like these spiritual possessions and the demon possessions and such. When I was in South Africa, there's this one, like, I went over there to start a church. We pioneered a church, and then I went over to, I went to Australia after that. And I get a call from South Africa, and it's from the church leader there. And they're like, you have no idea what's going on right now. I was like, what's happening? So in Africa, that church had Bible studies every single Friday. Like Friday nights were Bible studies, 30, 40 people coming to the church, eating together, just having a great time, right? And this church leader was inspired, before the Bible study to pray for people. So he announces, before we start Bible study, does anyone need prayer? And this girl just stands up right away, and she's like, I need prayer. And the thing that was interesting about this girl was everyone knew that there was something wrong. Meaning, there was churches that said she was spiritually possessed. Other people said she was like mentally ill, and she was on like some drugs for her, mentally ill state or whatever it was. And people were deciding whether it's spiritual or is it mentally ill. They couldn't figure it out, right? But this girl puts her hand up, and kind of like we all knew she was someone that could possibly be like spiritually possessed. So they took this girl upstairs, and three of the leaders went upstairs to pray for this girl. So there's the leader, and there's another person who's very, very strong in faith. But there's also this one other girl that went up to pray. But she's a microbiologist, and she's someone who's more physical. She only believes in what she's a scientist, right? She doesn't really believe in the spiritual realm. And what happened was they start praying for this girl, right? And as they're praying for this girl, they're praying and praying. And then at the very end of the prayer, we say, in Jesus' name. And the moment the pastor says, in Jesus, and the moment he said Jesus, the girl starts to scream. Like she's just screaming because she doesn't want to hear the name. And they kind of look like, what's going on? And then she falls on the ground, right? So now she's on the ground on her belly, and she's trying to crawl out of the room, but she's fighting with herself. Right? She's fighting with herself, trying to crawl out of that room. And they're kind of watching this like, what is going on? Like, what is going on right now? And the microbiologist, the scientist, remember, doesn't believe in these spiritual things. Arms are crossed, and she's thinking to herself, just thinking, this is fake. Oh, totally faking it. And that's what this microbiologist is thinking. All of a sudden, the girl on the ground, she stands up and goes to the microbiologist, and she says, do you think I'm faking? And she freaked out. The microbiologist freaked out like, oh my gosh. The other girl who's praying, in her head, she was praying like this. She's like, Jesus, help. Please, Jesus, help her. Jesus, like she's praying, Jesus, help her in her head. And the girl turns around, looks at that girl and says, not even Jesus can help me. And they prayed, and nothing, it didn't work at that time. And I get the call saying, this is what just happened. And, we're all like, what? Like, that's so crazy. Like, there's a bunch of these different types of stories that it's either firsthand, like I actually helped someone with a demon possession, or it's firsthand stories of this happened to me, this happened to me, remember, I was a missionary. I've been to 23, 24 different countries, and I'm working in the spiritual area. And because of this is why I get to see and hear about all these experiences of the demonic, of the spiritual realm. And I think it's like, there's one person, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because I don't want to make this into like a ghost story type of like podcast. I'll maybe tell it to you at another time, but there's someone that I helped with an exorcism. And it's kind of like the movies where they will take a knife and go to the wall and start carving words into the wall. And I had to deal with that person for like 3 weeks until they got better. And then they believed in Jesus and stuff like that too. But like, there's a bunch of these things, and a lot of it is true. It may not be as Hollywood as the movies, but I've seen it and it's true.